I'm Madison Gray, and this is the Wholehearted podcast. Today, I'm joined by Sarah Roof. Sarah is passionate about encouraging mothers to savor slow and simple life. And the more I talked to Sarah, the more I just felt like we've been friends forever, and even our stories had so much in common. In this episode, we talk a lot about feminine energy and how slow living, and specifically motherhood, was the catalyst for so much personal growth and unlocking creativity and just freedom in both of our lives. Sarah's Instagram celebrates slow motherhood and is wildly popular right now. If you're someone that enjoys Instagram and uses Instagram, I will leave her linked in the show notes. She shares very simple yet profound wisdom about slow and intentional life for mothers. For now, though, I hope that you are somewhere you can just relax and take it easy. And I hope that you enjoy this conversation about slow and simple life with Sarah and me. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am so excited to talk to you. I know that many other women, me included, find your content to be just so inspiring. Something I love that you do is you talk about unconventional life. And we were just kind of briefly talking about this before we went live. You talk about slow living and you talk about motherhood. And here you are talking to me from your RV on the road, and it's gorgeous. But yeah, you do it. You present this unconventional life, and you do it in a really beautiful way. It's appealing, I think women are drawn to it and they're like, oh, it doesn't have to be so weird, Mm-hmm. So right. I'm excited to talk to you. I feel like I'm really curious about, have you always been this way? Have you always had a little bit of a more slow approach to life? Were you that way as a child and a teenager, and then it just bled into motherhood? Or was there some, I know for me, I had I feel like I kind of was this way as a child. My mom homeschooled us, and so I had a very slow and peaceful childhood, but then something happened in the teenage years where I just got carried away in comparison and trying to be this stereotype of a mom. And then when I had my child, though, it was everything came back to me, and I feel like I really recentered on my values and not being so concerned about what other people think about my life. What was your experience like?
Yeah, I actually feel like you just described my story a little bit, because I was also homeschooled. I didn't know you were homeschooled, so that's really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have 6 siblings, so there's 7 of us, and we've all been homeschooled. So yeah, I definitely, and my mom wasn't well, it wasn't even conventional to homeschool back then, because I'm 28. So, and she started homeschooling when my sister, who's in her mid-30s now. So yeah, she homeschooled for a long time, back before it was cool and accepted,
Yeah.
So I'd say she was definitely very much the Charlotte Mason method, and
I love that.
Charlotte Mason, I'm sure.
I do.
But yeah, just kind of the gentle art of learning, and that's definitely a slow approach, which I mean, slow living, I don't feel like was a thing back then, but
she
definitely kind of embodied that for us. Yeah. So that was definitely my childhood. And then I feel like, just kind of like you, whenever you reach your late teens, early adulthood, I think, I don't know, something kind of switched in me, and I started becoming a little bit more, I don't know, I think there were a lot of different things that went into this. I battled with eating disorders for a few years, and so I think I definitely tapped into some sort of survival mode, that I was just constantly in that survival mode, and also losing touch with my feminine energy, I would say. So for those, 18, 19, 20, 21, those kind of years, I was definitely more trying to perform and just basing my worth off of what I was doing in life, which definitely led to, kind of racing and not operating on a place of stillness, but definitely just kind of that stress mode lifestyle.
Yeah.
So
I so relate to that.
Yeah. So I think definitely when I became a mom, though, it kind of all came to a head, because I was starting, before I became a mom, I was starting a freelance writing business, and I really loved writing. And so I worked at it pretty hard, and I enjoyed it, but it was definitely like kind of taking over my life and just again operating out of that space of stress. And so I became a mom, and everything kind of came to a screeching halt, whenever you're especially a new mom. Like now my son's a little bit older, so I can do more, pursue other things. But whenever he was a newborn, I was just, nap trapped all day and breastfeeding for hours at a time, which looking back now, I miss that and I want that again. But then at that point, it was kind of like, I kind of felt, worthless almost. Like, what am I doing with my life now? Like, I wasn't able
if you don't have those things to like chart yourself on.
Right. Yeah. Like, there was nothing to look at, like, look at my performance today or my productivity or, look at how much money I made. Like, it wasn't that anymore. And I was and I really wanted, because I had that example as a child, I really wanted to be home with my son, and it was never in my mind an option to like put him in daycare, which is, there's nothing wrong with that if you want to do that. But for me, I knew I didn't want that for him, but I just finding a place to like reconcile the two worlds and like in my heart, like saying, okay, there's value, even if I'm not producing and productive constantly and operating on that survival mode, like figuring out how to do that now as a mother and kind of reconcile who I was and figuring out how to tap into my feminine energy now, I feel like. So so about a year and a half into motherhood, it kind of all came to a head. Actually, we all got COVID in our family, and we were kind of stuck inside the house for like a month. And it was just, I don't know, like something about that struggle with that and me not being able to like be super busy because I wasn't working and because I wasn't doing all these productivity things for the first year of my son's life. I kind of scheduled us a lot. Like we were very busy, like on the go. I was one of those moms that had to have like a lot of things going on just to feel, like we were doing something with our life. And so then we got COVID for kind of a month time where we were just kind of stuck in the house. And, we started like gardening in the backyard and doing kind of like slow life things and I was starting to realize like, okay, this actually feels a lot better. Like as a mom, like I'm able to connect more with my son now that we're not rushing around constantly, and I'm able to enjoy him. I'm feeling better in my body, things like that. Although we were sick for part of it. We weren't sick the whole time, but some of the family got sick. It was just kind of the whole thing. So it wasn't like it was fun to be sick. But through that process, I was kind of tapping into more of like slowing down. And it's okay if we don't have a million things on our schedule every single day. Like it's actually maybe better. So that's kind of my initiation into soul living. And then I actually heard or saw like a hashtag, which maybe I had my head buried in the sand or something, but I had never even heard the term like slow living or slowing down, stuff like that. I hadn't heard that at all. And then around that time, I saw a hashtag on social media, and I was kind of like, okay, that sounds maybe like what I've been tapping into a little bit and what I'm interested in. So after that, I kind of looked into it a little bit more, and I was thinking, okay, well, what I was seeing, which I didn't come across your stuff for, I don't know, maybe another year. But at the beginning, I was just seeing like a lot of cottagecore, like European stuff, which was lovely, and I loved that. It is. But it was also like, it felt not like practical, I guess, for me as a mom. So I was thinking, well, I think probably other moms are in that boat. Like they want to connect more with their children or maybe live slower, but it doesn't look practical for mothers. So I started just sharing about like, how can we make this, for the mom?
Yeah. I love that. And you do it so well, and you do it beautifully. And something about that I really appreciate, because I think there's so much value in beauty. There's this push towards like, let's make everything relatable and real. And I love that too. I just don't think it has to be one or the other. And when you were talking, I also find it so fascinating that you mentioned like tapping back into your feminine energy through motherhood and slow living. And I find that to be my story. I feel like I was embodying femininity for very strongly through my I became a mom at 23, so pretty young, but through my teenage years and young adult years, I was like into pageantry, like very feminine, but actually really disconnected from my feminine energy, like really disconnected. And then it was that coming to a complete halt and having to be forced into that being mode of like, who am I without the doing? And that was so transformational. I think, like you said about the cottagecore, stuff. I really love watching those channels still, but
Yeah,
it's
they're
interesting that
beautiful.
they're beautiful. Most of them are single women though, and it's like, to me, that's not the point of slow living. It's like, it's a tool to help you tap back into like your power as a woman. That's at least what I feel it's been for me. What do you feel like? Because people often ask me like, what it even is slow living? Like, what is it? Because it's kind of vague, and also like, does that just mean you like walk around like a grandma? Like, what? I'm interested to know what it means to you when you talk about slow living.
Right. Man, it is hard. Like, I've actually tried to, like, I don't know, come up with like a definition that for me feels right, because yeah, I do think there's a lot of different aspects of it, and I think that can be the beauty of, it's not about like black and white, or this is exactly what it is and this is the way to do it. I think for me it's been kind of like stages, I would say. So like at the beginning, whenever I was very much like not within my feminine energy, and also like very much productivity oriented and operating out of like survival mode, I think it just started with like saying, okay, like I can free up my schedule. Like I don't have to operate in this, American busy lifestyle. Because there was just something about like when I stepped into motherhood, and I didn't know what I was doing at all. Like I still don't, but I was very kind of clueless as a young new mom. And so I kind of just like looked around me and saw what other families were doing, and it just seemed like busyness was like the go-to, like even when you run into someone that you haven't seen for a while and you ask them how they're doing, the first thing most moms will say is, "Oh, we've been so busy." Like that's just like the badge of honor almost. So I think for me, like slow living at the beginning was just kind of saying, okay, I don't have to live that way. I don't have to constantly be busy and doing and going, and just living in a more of a place of stillness, and almost just like doing life on our own terms too. Like, now with the RV living, like that's been part of it. Like living life, our schedule can kind of look like the way that feels right for us, and we don't have to have all these other extracurriculars, or we could one day and do that in a way that feels right for us as well. But just kind of not like looking into everybody else's life, but staying in our own lane and learning to kind of be intuitive and do what feels right. So that was like the first parts. And then, there's been other things that have come afterwards, like the decluttering aspects. You talk a lot about all that. And then I would say like learning how to actually rest, and combine that with how to work well within like a slow life. So that's something that you've also talked about that I've learned a lot from. I feel like just, how, because I think a lot of people think, okay, slow living, it has to just always be like resting or relaxing or making, baking something. And it's not always that. Like some of us, we may still like, have schedules to keep and things to do and things that we're really passionate about, like, or all of us do. We all have those things. But, how can we combine those things that we really love doing that fulfill us and that challenge us then with this, lifestyle that is slower and peaceful and keeps our nervous systems regulated and not always in a survival mode.
Yes.
So that was definitely not a definition of slow living, but that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Yes. What's great about it too is it's just not a diet. It's never going to be like a prescription where you can look at someone else. And I love this about it. It's just kind of a movement towards tapping back into you and what works for you, and not looking so much around at everyone else. And our culture is just frenzied, like you said. And I think something that's fascinating is that the more women that I connect with that are kind of like into this slow living thing, the more I find that they're like, wow, actually, when I started resting and slowing down, I realized, like, it popped into my mind this business idea that I have, like you mentioned, work or some dormant passion that I was like, oh, I thought I was going to put this off till I was like definitely done raising kids. But all of a sudden now I'm like, wow, I actually, this is filling me with, like, I have time for this, like, it's just
I have found that so many times.
Like,
when you create space for that stillness, like that's literally where every single one of my content ideas have come from. Like if like when we traveled back home for Christmas, and because we're traveling full time, and so we went back home for Christmas to see family, and we were very busy during that time, which, we hadn't seen anybody for months and we weren't going to see anybody for months again. So we had a lot of things on our schedule. And I told my husband, I was like, I can't really create content right now because I feel like there's no space for me to be still and just, have those thoughts come to me. So I definitely resonate with that. Like anytime I've created something that I feel proud of, it's always come from a place of like carving out stillness and, living out, like just having that peace in my mind.
Yeah.
For sure.
So how do you deal with, because this is still something that comes up for me, is like, do you find that you still have like almost like pangs of like FOMO? Like where you're like, okay, when you're from that centered place of rest and you're like, okay, no, the God, the Holy Spirit, I know this is my path and this is what's right for me. And maybe that's at large, maybe that's just today. You're like, you know what? I got 3 hours of sleep last night. And so what's good for me today is to cancel what I had planned and just slow down. Like really take, like you said, balance my nervous system, just like practice self-care and regulate with the kids. That very well, like sometimes you know how it feels, like you're convicted, like this is what's right today. And then all of a sudden you get on Instagram or you see another friend, they're like, what are you doing today? And you have that pang of like, oh my gosh, I'm literally doing nothing today. And like, at least we both know from personal experience, and I think most of the women listening to this podcast do too. Like, yeah, but all my creative juice, my energy, like we were talking about a second ago, comes from being in this place of like listening to my body, nourishing myself, connecting with the people in my life rather than just being on the go. I don't know, do you still have moments where you're like, oh my gosh, am I doing enough?
Oh, definitely.
Or is that not something that even comes up anymore?
I wish it didn't come up anymore, but
Right?
it definitely
Me
comes
too.
up for me. And I think for me, it's also like I am an introvert, definitely. So I don't think it's always necessarily like, oh, like I should be doing more like stuff with people or getting out there more. It's more for me like my default is I need to get this and this and this and this done today, like off my to-do list. And if I don't, then I don't feel great about myself. I feel like I've let myself down or I don't have enough to account for myself for the day. So then I can definitely fall into feeling guilty or just, kind of like worthless. Like, what did I do today? But yeah, like you said, coming back to that place where we recognize like that's not my worth, A. And then B, like sometimes the best thing we can do for our future productivity and for our future selves, like on so many different levels, would be to have a rest day. And also just for me, a big component of it has always been the difference I see in my son when I slow down and I really focus on the things that really matter to us. Like I would say we do live our, like our day to day as a mom with my toddler. Like the things I really focus on with him would be, like reading books together and getting out in nature. Like that's like huge for us. And, that's not like a huge, it's not showy or flashy or look what we did today. Like all these amazing things. It's really just simple stuff. Like if we sit down together and read books for an hour or two, like that is amazing for him. I see so much of a difference. So I think you said something about fear of missing out, FOMO. And I've seen this thing floating around. It's called joy of missing out. You've probably seen that. So like really just focusing on what am I gaining by missing out. And like I said, like for me, focusing on those things that I can tell make such a difference in my son's behavior and how we interact with each other when we do slow things down. So maybe we aren't getting to XYZ today, but we did ABC, like sitting outside together or reading, and just so much joy and fulfillment when we do those things.
Oh, that's so good. I know that if I need to hear that, that so many other women need to hear that.
I do too, constantly. Like it's always coming back because my default is definitely not that. So, yeah.
Yeah, as the kids get older, it's almost like I feel I have more of those fears come up of like, oh my gosh, my kids am I depriving them? And then like you mentioned earlier, my husband and I, every time there's like some type of, oh my gosh, have you ever read Simplicity Parenting?
No,
I forget who it's by. You would really like it.
I'm gonna write that down. Actually, I have.
I forget the author's name, but Simplicity Parenting. It's really great. It has the picture is like two kids with their feet dangling off a dock. So there you go.
Maybe
I
I've
think
seen
you've
that.
seen it.
Yeah, I know I have. That sounds really familiar.
Yeah, it's a good one. Anyways, in that book, he talks about like when kids start to kind of like go off the equilibrium scale into like some type of a frenzy, you can usually like the best remedy is to just kind of like the way he describes it is tucking your child back in with you and just bring, even if you had a lot planned for the week, if you notice your kid, I forget what he calls like the term for it, but he's like, you know it when you see it, when your kid's just like sliding off the scale into the Wild West.
Oh yeah. We've all been there.
Yeah. And he's like, the best thing to do, and I've just seen this work so well in my children, in our relationship and in our family dynamic, is that you don't necessarily have to cancel all your plans, but it's that idea of like tucking your kid in with you and just bringing them along and slowing down, like letting them linger, letting them putz around the yard and literally from an adult perspective do nothing. Like you said, like reading books and playing outside. I feel like those are the fundamentals of our homeschool life, even right now with a 3 and 6 year old. But yeah, you can tell just how quickly too that remedies their soul is just like slowing down, canceling their play dates, canceling their whatever extracurriculars, and just cooking with you for the day and then walking the dog together. And so I have to remind myself of that sometimes too. And it's like, oh my gosh, this other friend of mine goes to homeschool co-op 2 days a week and then they do 4 different sports, and I look at my kids and they're thriving, but still you feel that pang of mom guilt of like, am I doing enough? And then yeah, I remembered, just how much it helps them in their development and their self-confidence and their little nervous systems to just have those home days where they're tucked in with me. And I have to just experience some of that joy, like you said.
Yeah, joy
of missing out and being like, no, this is enough. This is enough for sure.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
This is so good.
Yeah. So, okay. So you guys are on the road right now, RVing.
Yeah.
And how long has this been? How long ago did you guys decide to do that? What brought this idea up? What's the why behind you guys just like, man, that had to have been quite like some late night conversations with your husband. Like, babe, let's do this crazy thing. Let's take our life on the road and go exploring.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of conversations like that. But it's funny. So I haven't shared this a lot online, but I said I grew up in a big family. We were homeschoolers, and my dad was a pastor. And so I was probably like 10, and my big family, we actually sold everything and we moved on the road in an RV. So we traveled around the country, and my dad would like preach at churches and stuff, and all of us children would sing and play instruments. I grew up playing violin. So that was kind of our life for about almost 3 years. And I loved it. Like, those are some of my favorite memories growing up, because we went all over the country and we were homeschooling then. So it was kind of just like, we'd go to museums and, just state parks, all that. We would just see all this cool stuff. And my mom was always searching out like history, all this stuff that we could just learn, like, almost like world schooling, how people do now. So I just have really fond memories of that growing up. And I'd always said, like, once we came off the road, I was probably like 13 or 14 or something, and we settled down. But I'd always said, like, oh, when I get married, I want to travel around for a while, just like we did. So I told my husband that years ago, and he had never really had a job that would have allowed that, because he did roofing and construction and stuff. So what was it, like a year or so ago, he started working for a company that he now can do like remote work just from home on his computer. So that happened, and we hadn't even really thought about it. We had actually just bought a house, our first house we had bought, and we had fixed it up a little bit, and we were happy there. And then he got this job that he could work remotely, and we kind of just started talking about, like, okay, well, now the work component is there. I know we just sort of bought this house, and it was a really great deal that we got. That's really why we bought the house, because it just kind of worked out. And so we we thought, okay, well, maybe we can make some money selling it and just, sell everything, get on the road like we'd always talked about.
Yeah.
So we decided to. It was kind of crazy. We decided to, and then within a month and a half, I think we already had our trailer and we were moved in.
Wow.
So it was
I didn't realize it happened that fast.
Yeah, it was really fast. But I think just because we'd always kind of talked about it and everything was falling into place with my husband's work already, it was just, and we hadn't accumulated a ton of stuff because it was just our first house that we had just bought a few months before. And I don't know, it just kind of felt like we didn't have deep roots yet or anything. So we were like, why not? Our son, he's still really young, and I don't know, let's just go for it.
It's really cool when things are just in alignment like that. You gotta celebrate
Yeah,
those.
it definitely felt like it was. It was just, it happened. Yeah,
that's
so
amazing.
Then we got on the road in end of September of 2023, and we did East Coast stuff, and then we spent November and part of December in Florida, which was really fun.
Oh, nice.
And then we came out to Missouri, which that's our home base, is Kansas City, Missouri. And we were there for about 6 weeks around Christmas, and then now we're doing Texas, and then hopefully the West Coast and national parks and stuff for the summer.
Oh my gosh, how fun. I have so many good childhood memories in the national parks of the West. I don't think I've ever been to any. I have a goal to go to all of them someday. We'll see about when that happens. But
yeah.
Oh my gosh, cool. The Western national parks. I'm sure you've been to a lot of them too, it sounds like.
No, I haven't actually, because when we traveled with my family, we were mostly on the East Coast a lot. We did a ton of I remember some really fun trips. We went to Boston and did all the historical stuff there.
Cool.
Went on ship tours and I don't know, all this cool stuff. So we were a lot of in the East Coast and then down south a lot, but we didn't do a ton of out west. So I've always, that's actually, I have been to California because we've flown out there, but I haven't done a lot of the in-between states. So I'm excited to sort of slowly travel through all those and see all those places.
I feel like my peak childhood memories, as you were talking, I was just reliving them because my family spent a lot of time road tripping. That was just how we traveled.
Yeah.
And so we went to Glacier National Park and did a whole bunch of stuff in Montana. Oh my gosh. Montana might be the most beautiful state I've ever been to.
I've always wanted to go there.
Oh my gosh. Gorgeous. And Wyoming, Yellowstone and the Grand Tetons and even the sequoias, oh my gosh, there's so many just incredible nature locations. Cool. That's incredible. Okay, so when something that I just thought of when you were talking was I think it's so isn't it sad that it's kind of unusual that moms nowadays, motherhood, it's become kind of I'll settle down and then I'll get married and then I'll have kids. And it's kind of this sloping down energy of just sadness, really. I don't know who looks forward to being a mom with that kind of cultural expectation of just the best of your life's behind you now that you're married and you're going to have kids. And I just think it's really inspiring that you're reliving some of your childhood memories with your child and having this grand adventure. And I feel that's how motherhood should be. We should be stepping into the next great chapter of our life, not just settling down into daycare mode at our house. I don't know. That does not light my soul on fire. As a mom, maybe it does for some others, but I don't know. I'm passionate about changing the stereotype about motherhood as being just so depleting and not beautiful, or you're not sexy anymore after you're a mom. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that I haven't found that to be true in my life. It's been so invigorating and I have so much creative, I'm pregnant right now. And I feel I just have so much more creative energy. And I want women to know pregnancy can be like this,
I love that. Yeah. I haven't. So when I was pregnant, I definitely hadn't tapped into all this yet. And I really want to have another baby. So I just can't wait to find out what that will be like as, as someone that's a little bit more
it's really different.
And I can't wait to see that difference. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's very different. From my first pregnancy with Mallory to especially this baby, but even my last one too, just being like we talked about before, more tapped into my feminine energy. I think I didn't even know, like, it sounds like you grew up a Christian too.
Yes.
And I still am, like, a very passionate Christian, but all I knew of masculine and feminine was like a stereotype of like, I don't even know. It was just like not correct teaching.
Right. Yeah. I think a
But
lot
yeah,
of us
once
grew
I
up with
stepped
that.
out of, once I stepped out of that and like, was kind of, it feels like set free into what feminine, like true feminine energy is, the way God made us, and how we're just so intuitive and we're so powerful when we're in this state of being, like we've talked about this whole podcast. It's just such a different side of me that feels, I don't know, like so unstoppable or something.
Yeah. I think going back to what you said before about why do women in our culture, why do we think it's like, oh, our best years are like college and, early career and dating and all this. And then it's like, whoa, we go down. I do think it's because a lot of women are kind of just more tapped into their masculine energy, and then they don't, there's a lot that probably goes into it, but we do see women now, it's like so many women waiting so much longer to have children because we do have that mindset. It's like, the best years of my life are behind me now. And then you do see a lot of women now living that out as a mother. It's especially when I first started writing on motherhood and soul living, there were just so many women that it was like they couldn't even relate to it, because it was like, as a mom, you could just tell, like when they would talk to me, it was like they were almost miserable in this role as mother. And I think it's a lot of it just, they've been told this is what motherhood is, here you go, like dish it up. And not to say that there's not really hard days, and it does like stretch us to our limits a lot of times, and there's really hard seasons too, where maybe you just had a baby and you have toddlers in the house, and it's just, you'll have some days where you're probably like, maybe feel a little bit like you're drowning. But I think on the whole, whenever we are stepped into our feminine energy and into the ways that God has called us to be, because I truly believe God called us as women to be mothers, if he's given us that gift, that we're called to it, and it's an amazing and fulfilling role. And so it doesn't have to be like the end of our life, because for me especially, now that I had, when I went through learning about soul living and just let go of just the control and wanting to, just all the ways that I used to be, I finally was able to actually, like, I don't know, I feel like actually that's when my life started. Obviously all the other experiences I learned from, and I enjoyed a lot of them, but now, like, I feel so much more, like you said, like the creativity and all the things that I'm passionate about and love doing, I feel like those were born out of motherhood, actually. And I was able to come into my own now. So I think, it's just encouragement to any mother out there that maybe she's a new mother or something, like, my life's over. Like, it's definitely not if you don't want it to be. Like, if you learn how to operate in a place of rest and abundance and regulating yourself as a woman and learning how to operate like that, then it doesn't have to be the end of your story at all. Like, it should be definitely like a new beginning, I think.
Oh my gosh, I could not agree more. And I also agree. I mean, I think we both would agree that our shared story is that, like, we both in this challenge of motherhood, it's like the limitation actually bred more freedom and creativity, like having my time. I mean, children need us, right? As mothers, they require our care 24/7.
Yeah.
Especially infants. But like this idea that that the best thing for us to do would just be to continue life with no limitation and no responsibility is just such a lie. Like, it's actually our self-growth and becoming our best selves is often born of those moments where we're like, oh my gosh, what are all these emotions that I have to confront now? It's like, no, that's the release. Like, you are so close now to growing into this person that is the highest version of yourself, or who God wants you to be, or whatever.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful.
Okay, so when you were talking about feminine energy, because I know a lot of my listeners are really curious about this, I would love to know if you have any specific tips for like your past self for tapping into your feminine energy, or things you've done or things you think about as a mother? Since you don't have all the free time in the world, like, I know that it is work to be a mother, but then it also is this mindset shift. Anyway, I'm just curious what your tips for tapping into feminine energy, what that's looked like for you.
So something I'm really interested in and kind of working on a resource for mothers right now in this realm would be learning about our cycles and syncing our lifestyle with the phases of our cycle. So I don't know if this completely will answer your question, but I think we can't separate, like, if we're talking about feminine energy, then we also have to think about like our internal clock, like how God made us as a woman. That's like to me, that's kind of our feminine energy, and there might be more to it, but right now I've just been so just learning and diving deep into this idea of like using that power that we've been given and our strengths, not seeing them as weakness, just kind of like how we said the culture views motherhood as though it's now like this terrible, depleting thing. We often as women view our cycle as that, like our menstrual cycle, how it's like, oh, it's just terrible and we just have to put up with it, or maybe we get on something to almost, just stop it, or we just kind of like try to minimize it. And instead, I've been really like, part of tapping into our feminine energy for me has been learning how to work with it. And, that starts with awareness and tracking of it. And, just kind of like taking a step back and stop, not like numbing it out or ignoring it, but saying, okay, like, how can I tap into this and use my power? Because most women don't know, like, certain times of the month, we are able to communicate better. Like, we're great at speaking. Like, if you have to do something like we're doing right now, it'd be great to actually know about the phases of your cycle and use certain times of the month to do like these amazing creative things, or, like I said, speaking, or just, decluttering project. Like, there's so many different times of the month that we're better suited to certain things as a woman. And it's been really like liberating and empowering to learn about those things. And I think whenever we stop operating just always as though like the masculine energy is kind of like, I can do things all the time, like any day of the month, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm just going to tackle this thing right now because this is what I need to do. This is on my to-do list. But as a woman, like saying, okay, well, actually my body doesn't want to do that right now. It's not best suited to do this task right now. And being okay with that and saying that's totally fine. Like, I can get to this like next week. And today I'm actually going to rest because that's the best thing to take care of my body. So, there was something I was going to say about that and I forgot what it was, but like, I think as our society, we run off of the male hormone cycle, which is 24 hours. And so it's, very much within like our work day. It's the 9 to 5. So we start the morning with because men start the morning with all their highest testosterone, right? And then it starts sloping, and by the end of the day, it's when you start kind of like the end of the workday and you don't do anything else and you kind of just sit around and you're watching Netflix or whatever. But actually, as women, like, our day isn't organized by that slope. It's actually a 28-day cycle. So there's certain days of the month where we're better suited to things than the other days. So just, I think for me, that's been like really huge, just tapping into that. And there's a lot to it though. So I feel like I can't articulate it perfectly because I'm still learning. But I think if someone that's listening wants to learn more about it, my life felt like it changed when I listened to the book In the Flow by Elisa Lee, I think. Have you listened to that or read that one?
Oh my gosh, I love that one.
Yeah,
it's one of my favorite books of all time. Yeah, so good. It really is life changing. And speaking of like eating disorders and gosh, the freedom that comes from learning about your cycle like this for me too. I mean, I think every woman has struggled at some point with some type of restriction or emotional attachment with food. And learning about your cycles and the foods that support your cycles and realizing like, okay, no, this really truly is like the last diet. I don't need to diet. I can nourish my body in this way that it's so mind-blowing. It really is. Then there's so many layers to it. It's just,
there are
it's
so many
exciting.
layers, and that's something like you just said I would definitely encourage a mother if she's like feels like she's always operating in that sort of fight or flight mode where she's kind of in survival mode and maybe really like masculine energy, like constantly on the go doing and doesn't even know how to rest or slow down.
Yeah.
That's a really great place to start. Is
You're right.
The nutrition aspect, or just like start nourishing your body, because that was one thing that was so simple. But I started eating breakfast, or like not even breakfast, but just having something balanced in the morning within 30 minutes of rising, and I noticed a huge change, because when we look at what happens in our bodies if we don't eat in the morning, our cortisol spikes. And so the rest of the day, we are kind of in this like fight or flight mode. Our body doesn't know, like it thinks we're in this sort of survival stress state. So then the rest of the day, it's not just about like not eating, it affects every aspect of, our mental state. And so that's something that helped me, like just the beginning of the day, like keep that stress level low and help us feel like a nourished woman, is just nourish your body first thing in the morning.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think for so long I did so many different diets and thinking that was self-care. And then, gosh, the freedom that comes from just switching your entire perspective on food and really starting to see self-care, especially as a mother for me. I think prioritizing self-care is like one of the practical things I do for nourishing my feminine energy. Because when you're depleted, it's like, I think it's probably biologically correct to not be able to handle your life, right? Like if you're just completely depleted,
you're
running on
operating
stress hormones.
Survival. There's no way to like, I was doing some research about this for it was a series I was doing on my Instagram a while back. And literally like our brain starts shutting down different little, like, I don't know all the technical stuff, but like we have these, compartments that are open up to, laughter and love and patience and all of these things that we really prioritize, and makes a, a good mom. Like those are the things that we want to be. But when we are in this fight or flight survival mode where we're operating out of just stress constantly, it's not our fault. Like we literally just can't, like our brain starts shutting down those things. Like we're not going to want to sit there and laugh with our children, or, enjoy like a slow evening with them. We're literally going to be like, let's go, let's get out the door, let's do this, let's do that. It's going to be on to the next thing on the to-do list, because we don't even, like our brains and bodies like won't let us kind of just relax. Like we're just constantly stressed out because we are trying to survive.
It's such an important thing to mention because, often I think women feel a lot of guilt or shame or, there's just a lot of emotions that go into, why am I unable to enjoy XYZ, whether it's a meal, whether it's intimacy with my husband, whether it's watching my kids play at the park. And it's like, maybe you've just been like really misguided on basic things like food. Like your body is screaming for nourishment. Your body is like, you need rest. Or for me, like small things like blue light. Like when I shifted from not using my phone, I used to do my work all at night. Like after the kids went to bed, I'd be like, great, this is my time to work. Oh my gosh, that depleted me so much. I started getting gray hair, like, and I didn't, like, I don't know. It was just such an immediate change. And then when I started just being like, you know what, it was after I read In the Flow, actually. And I realized like, oh my gosh, this is really bad for my body as a woman. Like my husband could do this, but my body can't do this. I've had 2 children. Like I need to take care of myself better. Anyway, this is a rabbit hole, but just little things like, okay, I'm going to not look at my phone after it gets dark. I'm going to figure out other activities I can do. And that was so transformational. Just like a little thing that I was like, wow, I feel so different. I sleep so different. And I actually enjoy taking time like this right now this to me is self-care too. It's like, I'm taking time to work on this passion project of mine, connect with other like-minded women, share this thing that I'm so passionate about. And I used to feel really guilty to like ask my husband to like allow me some time to work for an hour every day, which is just,
it was, that was a shift too of like, oh no, my husband like wants to help me. Like he wants to care for me and provide for me.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm just a burden on him. So anyway, lots of little just like basic shifts.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Like, I think a lot of times if you're new to this space or you're not operating in this way, a mother can look or listen to what we're saying right now. It can feel like really overwhelming and just kind of like, where do I start? Like my life doesn't look anything like this, or it doesn't feel like this at all in my body. And it just feels overwhelming. But like you said, like the smallest shifts can actually make a huge difference. And that's, I think, for my own soul living journey, I didn't start like with everything, and I didn't even know all these aspects at the beginning, which is really great because I just kind of like, it was really from the Lord. Like he just started coming to me to clear out my schedule. So that was just like the first thing I did. And then there's been so many other components to it, but they all started just like with one shift. And I think, as a woman, like you just need to take one thing at a time, especially when you have children. Like you don't need, the experts will tell you that. Like don't tackle a ton of new things at once. Like don't try to overhaul your schedule and start potty training a kid, like doing all these different things like at the same time. Like do one thing at a time. Like maybe this week we focus on eating breakfast. Actually, like if you're a mom that doesn't ever eat breakfast and you're just constantly stressed out, like maybe just start there. Like eat breakfast this week, like every day. Like just take the time for it. Like just a small simple shift, because I've seen like that will ripple out, and then maybe something else will open up that you're like, okay, maybe now I want to start working on this thing. But it doesn't need to be all at once. Like this is our motherhood journey, this is our life journey, so we can take it at our time. And that's the whole thing, we're slowing down so we can take a slow approach to even growing and becoming.
I think too, my just like concept of time over this, I guess I hate to use the word journey. I'm going to use it. This journey of slowing down, my just like concept of time has warped so much in like a positive way, where I used to be really obsessed with like, oh my gosh, what time did we get the kids down? What time is it? How much time is that? Or even I would fast forward in the future and be like, okay, I'd really like to make this change in my life. How long do I think that'll take me? Or how long will it be before I start to feel different? I'd be like, well, it'll probably be 6 months or something. And it's like, I don't know. I think we really underestimate what little things can do. And like we've talked about this whole podcast, like what being in your feminine energy, time kind of warps for you, where things just start to feel more natural and come more natural. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm like not trying as hard.
And I know. Oh, I love
happening.
That. I love
that. And I feel like I actually see this with you and your Instagram. I feel like I'm always just like celebrating your feminine energy just being on fire, because I see this happening on your account, where like you will share something and it just is like the simplest thing, but it's you and it's unique, and it's like you can tell it's from the Holy Spirit. Like it's just like so different from what other people are sharing online, but it's so simple. And it's just like it's magnetic, like somehow people are just drawn to it.
Really
and that's beautiful. I think, I don't know, I'm celebrating that. I think it's really inspiring.
Yeah, well, I feel the same way about the stuff that you put out there. And I do think it's like not, when we operate in a place of, like we said, rest and feminine energy, and really just leaning into the Holy Spirit, because definitely every time I create something, I really try to just stop and pray about it, because I'm like, what I'm going to say isn't going to help anybody, but if God is in this, then it definitely can. It can speak to somebody. So I really appreciate you pointing that out and just being there to cheer me on.
Totally. I think we need more women like that. I don't know, where we just aren't so obsessed with comparing ourselves or
because we're not like different. A threat to each other,
No, it's like there's room at the table. There is so much
each
room
other up and learning.
There's
so much room.
And there's so much freedom when you start to just like enter that space of like, oh my gosh, she's not taking from me by being a great mom and having, I don't know, success at whatever God's put in her life. It's I don't know, there's just, like you said, there's abundance for all of us. And God is a gracious God. He wants us to grow. He wants the best for us. I don't know. I'm so tired of these like negative, just motherhood things online.
Yeah, like
and
the relatable content too can be, that can be hard.
it can be, it's like it doesn't leave you in a good place. I agree.
Right, like making fun
It's
of our
like,
kids
let me
or our
share my
husbands.
truth. Yeah. I
Yeah.
agree. I listen to this podcast sometimes. I don't remember what it's called. I think her name's Abby Sharp. Have you heard of her?
I don't think so.
I forget her podcast name, but she was doing a whole podcast about this, about how it's like not helping mothers to, and this is controversial. I found it to be very encouraging. She was like, it's just not helping mothers to like be on this like thing where it's like, let me share my truth. And just like all this negativity about motherhood and how it's ruined my life, and like my children are a drain on me, and my breasts are no longer what they used to be, and like all this just like crazy stuff. And she's like, I don't know, how do you read that on social media? How do you look at your kids after that? Like, how does dinner go after you read that? How does it really set you free? Is that truth like really sitting in your soul and just like setting you on the path that you're meant to be on? Or is it kind of like, I don't know,
and
weighing you down?
The thing about social media is that it's not like we're just seeing one post like that. If you start interacting with stuff like that, then that's like your whole feed. It's filled up with stuff like that, which is actually really sad. Like, because like we said before, like motherhood in our culture is definitely kind of like a negative thing, and I think that stuff perpetuates it. And then like then you're sitting there scrolling for 30 minutes or an hour and taking in so much of that. Like, of course you're not going to have this positive experience with your children and your family or bring that positive light to it, because it's just negative.
Totally. Yeah. I think taking my thoughts captive about motherhood, my husband, like just it's so, I know it's kind of corny, but like writing affirmations about like my family is a gift to me, and it makes me see it different. It really is. It changes like the way I perceive my life, and even new opportunities that I see come into my life. It's so different when you just have that subtle mindset change.
Right. Yeah.
So, okay, you talked a little bit about like where to start with slow living. I'd be curious to know, like, if someone is just feeling like they're at the end of their rope, they're depleted, and they're really drawn to this idea of like, okay, you know what, this year this is gonna be like my theme. I'm gonna slow down. I'm gonna embrace my feminine energy. I'm gonna like let it be easy. I'm gonna let it feel good. I'm gonna face my proverbial demons. Like I'm just gonna just open up. I'm gonna let it go. Where do you feel like, if you were speaking to younger you, like where would you recommend that you start as like a entry point?
Yeah. Well, like I kind of said before, I am a firm believer that we shouldn't like slow down in a hurry. I love
that. Oh my
God. I
That's
have
so
a
good.
newsletter, a monthly newsletter I started like a year ago, and I had this like welcome email. It's since changed, like I have a different one, but I had like a whole section about this, like slowing down in a hurry, because I think now in the age of social media and stuff, we see these accounts like you and I, and just some of this content, it really resonates with a lot of women, because I do think it's more of our God-given calling in the way of life we were supposed to live. And so sometimes women can see it and say, I want this, so let me jump headlong into it. And I've noticed, because the soul living movement's been around for a little while now, and even like within motherhood, like I didn't see anything about this before I started my account, which maybe, like I said, my head was buried in the sand, but I didn't really see anything else about this. But since I started my account, like in the last year and a half, it's like I see it everywhere now. So I do think now I've noticed, like I now see almost like, what's the word, counter slow living movement. Like people are saying, oh, I've tried that. Like I've seen other content now where, not a ton, but I can tell some of these women that maybe they were even like, they would talk to me and stuff, and now they're kind of like, well, it's not for everybody, or you know, like there's just
I've seen
different mindsets around it now.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's fine. They can
Totally.
feel that way, but I do think sometimes it's because we're going about it in a way that's like I want to look like that lifestyle, or I want to like, I'm going to start baking all the sourdough bread. I'm going to like do all these other things that look
Which
like
is actually
slow
just
living
like
to me.
doing the more
Right.
stuff.
Yeah. And it's not actually like the inner work, like you said before, like
Yes.
it's, you know, we have to peel off those layers of
Yeah.
all these things that have not been serving us for years, like maybe the self-dependency and like living in that state of survival mode, and our nervous system, even like there's so much that goes into it. So I think if you just hear a conversation like this and you're like, I'm going to just change my entire life right now, that's not going to happen. So, and you shouldn't try to do that, I think, because then you are going to get burnt out. Like, again, it's just another thing. It's another thing to do. So we don't want to do that. And it's kind of hard to know, I think, where to tell someone to start, because I think everyone starts in their own place, like where we, you know, they have to meet themselves where they are. And so, like I said, for my journey, my thing was at the beginning, I just felt like our life was just kind of hectic and we were doing too much. And so for me, I just started there. Like I was like, okay, you know, what could we get rid of? And I really believe at the beginning, it's really important to sit down and get to the bare bones of your life. Like write down your list of top priorities, like, or maybe just write down everything that you're prioritizing right now in your life. Like, what are we doing? Like, sit down and just write it out. And if it looks overwhelming after you write it all out, it probably is. Like, it's a lot. Yeah. So then what I encourage, like I said, I had a newsletter for about a year that just, we talked about like a monthly challenge each month. So the first challenge that we ever did was about priorities. And I said, okay, write down all your priorities and then start by circling like 3 and just say, these are like my top 3 priorities for this season of life. Like, because we can't prioritize everything and do it well. And our bodies, like, we're feeling that now, like it's too much. Yeah. So if you're feeling that stress and you're feeling like it's too much, you know, really get clear, like, what could you kind of like get rid of right now? Like, what could you stop doing that's not essential? And maybe it's just, you know, when you really look at it and look at each task you're doing and say, why am I doing that? Why is that a priority right now? And if it doesn't need to be, then maybe you can just let go of it for now. And that's, for me, that's where I started. But, you know, again, it's like everybody's different. Like maybe someone listening to this, they do need to prioritize like the nourishment component. Like as a mother, maybe they're running off of like no nourishment. And so if they're still continuing to like undernourish their body, I don't think sitting down and focusing on priorities and getting rid of more in your life and stuff is necessarily going to help you completely. Like I think starting with like nourishing your body might be a great place. So I don't know. It's just hard to say exactly where to start. I think really pray and use the Holy Spirit's guidance in your life and say, I really want to change. Like something needs to shift in my life. Where do I need to start? And there's so much great content out there. Like someone, if they're interested, they could, you know, go through your YouTube. Like your videos are beautiful and give us glimpses into this, or go through some of my content, or sign up for my newsletter. I don't know. There's a lot out there, but I do think more than anything, the Holy Spirit guiding us, really, that you can't, like, this is His work in our life. So that's really what I believe.
I agree. As you were talking, I thought of one last question. I know we're approaching an hour, but I'm just dying to know if you Sabbath, and if that, like, you touched on rest and you touched on food. And I agree. I probably would not have been able to come up with like a perfect place to start, because that just doesn't, there's no perfect place to start.
Yeah.
It's about like not embracing the aesthetic of slow living. It's about like slowing down and letting that, like we talked about at the very beginning, how have that those moments when we were both breastfeeding and nap trapped and you feel worthless and you're covered in breast milk and you're squishier than you've ever been and your body is like so different. And those are the transformational moments that like this life bloomed for us. And I think that's an important point to make, is that like rest and food are both gifts from God. I believe that so strongly. That we just miss. There every day there's an opportunity to like encounter those gifts and like sit with them and actually receive them. And that is just like a perfect place to start. But my actual question is like, what do you ever feel like you struggle on Sabbath day? Like where more of that heaviness kind of comes up? Do you feel like you just like love, you're like, I am my best self on Sabbath day?
Yeah, so I started practicing like a Sabbath rest, and I we my Sabbath rest is on Sunday, and I've talked about this on social media, and I have people say like, "Oh, well, God's Sabbath was on Saturday," and there's been some debate about that. And I guess for me, I am a Christian, but I wouldn't say, and I believe in practicing Sabbath rest because God ordained this from the beginning, like the way He created the world. He rested on the seventh day, and I believe He did that for a reason because we all need rest, and it's not just physical rest; it's a spiritual rest of saying, "I'm not in control. I don't have to work constantly. I can give up that control to God. And this is my day to really enjoy Him and enjoy my family, enjoy my community, and just bask in the delight of knowing I don't keep the world spinning, you know? So I do think it's a very spiritual thing, but it's not like I do this because I have to, or like I'm, has to be a certain day. Like if you wanted to practice your Sabbath on Monday because that worked better for your family, in my book, that's fine. Like, you know what I mean? It's not, not doing this out of rigidity or something like that, or religion. It's definitely spiritual, but yeah. Anyway, so that's like aside. But what was your question? Point. I'm like totally forgetting your question.
No, I'm actually literally just asking for me. This is not for a friend. I just find, number one, it's really hard to find other women who Sabbath. Just is. And so since I know you do, and I so respected, we were like chatting over Instagram planning this podcast, and you were like, I said, I'm going to send you the questions or whatever that we might talk about. And you're like, okay, great. I won't be on social media tomorrow. It's my Sabbath or something like that. And I was just like, dude, oh my gosh. I respect it so much. So I knew that you Sabbath or just took a day of rest.
Yeah. I remember your question now. You were like, do I struggle
with
I'm
sorry. I am going on and on.
No, I was like totally lost too.
I'm just curious if it's like, if you ever feel that it's hard or I don't know, emotional.
Like what comes out.
Or if you always feel like it just gets easier and easier. I don't know. Just your experience, like with what that day's like.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember when I started this practice. I think I started like taking a social media break was where it kind of started for me because before that I was like popping on social media every day of the week whenever I wanted to, and I just didn't really think anything about it. And then I started getting that conviction, like I need to, because it had started being more of like not a job, but I was like creating content and responding to people and stuff. So I was like, I need to take a day where I'm not doing that. Like I'm trusting God and resting in Him. So I think I started that like a year and a half ago. I don't remember, but it was definitely really hard. Like I feel like anytime I have intentionally taken a step away from something in my life that I enjoy and want to work hard at, it is really it's a challenge. And it's also that whole like some days you're kind of like, oh, it wouldn't hurt to just like I need to check on this one thing, I need to do this. But I really thankfully
I do that for sure.
Thankfully with God's help I feel like I've been able to really set it aside and just say no. Like it's not something I always say to myself whenever there's something that like God has convicted me about, but I want to go back to. I'm like, it's not for me. It's not for me right now. Like whatever that may be, I'm like, it's not for me.
Yeah.
So, on Sundays I don't get on social media, and I don't work, and I don't need to focus on those things that are the rest of the week. Like maybe they do feel like I'm enjoying them, but we need to take that step away from it, I believe. So, like I said, it's not super rigid for me. Like it's not like, oh, I would never like tidy up my house on my Sabbath rest day or something. But within that, like I do think a lot of women, like as mothers, we think, oh, I could never take a rest day because what's the saying? A woman's work is never done. So we take that to heart, and it's like we never have a day where we like don't do projects and we're not rushing around. And so I have actually started, like it started with the social media, and then it went to like other aspects of work, and then it was like, well, maybe as a mom, like I should actually not do like big household projects on Sunday or like do a ton of errands. Sometimes we like yesterday actually we did go grocery shopping because we're kind of like a little bit of a rougher area right now, and I wanted my husband to come grocery shopping with me because today he couldn't. So normally I do my grocery shopping on Monday, but we did it on Sunday. But yeah, like I said, it's not rigid, but it is like very much like how can we carve out space on this day to really just enjoy each other. Like yesterday I don't nap normally. I just can't. Like for some reason, I'm not a napper. But yesterday, I literally, I put my phone, like I don't know if you've heard me talk about the RO. it's like a box you put your phone away in. But I did a RO session, and I lay down with my son. He contact napped on me, which like he never does now, but he slept on me for like 2 hours, and I slept for like an hour and a half. It was so nice. And
that
again, like most days, like I wouldn't allow myself to do that because there is a lot of stuff to do within you know, our home. But like it's just so nice to have that day where we're like, let's just take a family afternoon nap. Like it's just,
you give yourself permission.
That.
It's so
and
free.
And I think there's so much to rest, and you just did a podcast on this, so you probably covered a lot of this. But I think if you're new to Sabbath rest, like opening your mind up to like, what kind of rest do I need on my Sabbath? Like there's so many different kinds of rest, and sometimes we need like a social rest. Like maybe we just need to not like be around anybody, or some days maybe you do need like that community to fill you up on your rest day. Sure. Like you need to commune with other women or go to church, you know, like you need those community aspects. So just really getting curious and saying like, how am I depleted this week, and how can I intentionally bring that rest and that Sabbath to my heart?
Yes. Oh, I think that's a perfect place to end. I think you just shared, I mean, I feel so encouraged. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I think that it's just going to be such light. I hope that at least that's how it's received by the women listening. So thank you, Sarah.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciated it. It was fun to talk.
It sure was. So I'll share about where women can find you.
Yeah.
I'm sure if they're familiar with my content, they're familiar with yours, but I'll be sure to share where they can find you on Instagram. I know you started a YouTube channel. Is that still going on?
Oh my goodness. I have one video up still, and I have
video. Okay.
Yeah, I have one video, and that's it. Although if someone's curious about like our RV life, I do talk more about
perfect.
How we got into it, why, all of that. So there you go, right there. And I have plans to like be better. I think of your YouTube, and I'm like,
plans to be better.
I aspire to that because I love that form of content. It's so beautiful and just so much like slower and, you know, long form, which I love, and then I just like kind of neglected it. So I do want to get back to it.
I think it's okay. I think it's okay, Sarah. You know, it'll be ready when it's ripe, and then you'll go for it.
True. But thank you.
You're welcome. I give you permission, not that you're asked for it at all, but I respect that you're like, you know what? No, this is what I'm doing right now, and this is enough. And it certainly is. You are killing it on Instagram. I'm really excited for you.
I appreciate that.
All right. Well, I hope we can chat more in the future. I feel like we could talk for hours. So anyway,
I know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks so much for joining me on this episode. I really hope that you enjoyed it and it leaves you feeling inspired and refreshed for either the rest of your day or your day tomorrow if it's the end of the day. I also just want to say a really heartfelt thank you to all of you women out there listening. I really believe that we attract people that we're an energetic match for. And it's such an honor to me, the women that find my work. And I mean that so deeply. When I read your reviews, when I read your comments, all the messages and emails I get about both my YouTube channel and this podcast, it's just incredible. And so I wanted to say thank you for the support and the encouragement. And those of you that have left me nice reviews on this podcast, I see you. Thank you so much. It really helps this podcast grow and reach the people that it needs to reach. All right. So thank you. I will see you in the next episode. Until then, take care.